Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the North Carolina Botanical Garden and another Lunchbox talk and our Saving Our Savannas Stories of the Longleaf Pine series. Grateful to have folks here in person as well as in our Zoom audience. We had about 130 folks register for this event, so we've got a good group of folks online as well. And I'm Joanna Massey-Lalikas. I'm the Director of Learning and Community Engagement here at the Garden. And in the back of the room, I have David Michaud with me, co-moderator. He's working with our Zoom audience. So grateful to be here with you and have another special guest with us today. So we do have folks, as I mentioned, tuning in online, and we have folks from across North Carolina, across the Southeast, some folks from California, and I believe even one international guest today. So thank you all for being here. I'd like to take a moment to thank our Saving Our Savannas sponsors for supporting the season's programs. The Nature Conservancy as an advocate sponsor, the American Indian Center and Southern Conservation Partners as promotion sponsors, and Jackie and Rob Trickle, as well as the Triangle Land Conservancy as community sponsors. We're so grateful for the support to help us broaden our reach and do program planning and support all of our efforts this spring, this whole season for Saving Our Savannas. All right, it's really my pleasure to be able to introduce Sarah Crate. She is the Outreach and Communications Coordinator for the Longleaf Alliance and has been an integral part of our our steering committee for this program. We really couldn't have done this without you, Sarah. We really appreciate all of your input into the program. So Sarah joined the Longleaf Alliance in 2020, and she grew up on a farm in Missouri where her family instilled a love for the land. From those early experiences, Sarah pursued a biology degree at William Jewell College and then worked in plant ecology and fire ecology research at Texas A&M and Archibald Biological Station in Florida. Prior to joining the Longleaf Alliance, Sarah served as the Longleaf Program Coordinator for North Carolina Forest Service. So she has a long history with the Longleaf pine and all the communities associated with it. Sarah's happy to work at a place that combines all her favorites, longleaf and its diverse plant species, prescribed fire, and outreach. Sarah, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'll hand it off to you.
Hello, good morning. I am just going to pull up my presentation here. I just want to preface this talk with saying that talking about longleaf is really one of my favorite things to do. And so I welcome any question related to this talk, or if that has triggered, some additional wandering or wondering, and we can discuss any longleaf topic that you might be interested in today. My favorite way to explore longleaf, of course, is in longleaf, in the woods. And since we are in a classroom today or in front of our computers today, I thought I would start this by going on a virtual trip to the Longleaf Pine Savanna, one here in North Carolina. This is courtesy of Brady Beck Photography and a YouTube series that Brady developed called Longleaf Serenity. They are 1-minute short videos of just immersing yourself into longleaf. And I highly encourage you to go explore them on your own. If you were to do so at home with your sound on in your computer, you would hear the sounds of this habitat surrounding you. The thing I want you to notice as we watch this video is the structure of this longleaf habitat. You're seeing scattered trees, lots of open area to allow the sunlight to hit the forest floor. And that's really key, because while we were on a bird's eye view of this forest, if we were there in person, we would see a variety of plants, and we might, if we were lucky, encounter a few of its wildlife as well. The forest we just saw was a magnificent, iconic longleaf forest. But when we look at a lot of the longleaf that's on our landscape today, it might look something a little bit more like this. And I know that there are a few people in this audience, and I'm sure as well joining us virtually, that might have this on their property themselves. What we're looking at here is a longleaf restoration project where these trees were planted in an area that had been long ago converted from a longleaf forest. And it was then brought back to longleaf by actually planting the trees. If you look closely, you might see a grass stage longleaf hiding in those grasses. But most of these trees, of course, are getting taller above the grass stage. They're bolting in their bottle brush stage. Longleaf restoration doesn't just look like planting trees. Sometimes it looks very different, especially in areas that have seen a long period of fire exclusion. So the photo that I have brought here is one documentation about how much I love talking about longleaf pines. The people in this photo are my family members, my parents, as well as my son, where they visited North Carolina from Missouri 5 or 6 years ago. And where did we take them? Weymouth Woods, Boyd Track. So I'm sure some of you might recognize that tree, maybe have a photo of you hugging it yourself. Of course, this is the big tree, the old tree, I should say, in Southern Pines, North Carolina, estimated to be 475 years old. The reason why I'm showing this photo is because this is an example of restoration of a different kind, where instead of planting, we're taking a mature forest that has lost several characteristics of what we consider healthy longleaf pine habitat. And the park managers are working to bring that back. That original video that we saw from Brady Beck had that open canopy, a diverse ground cover layer, lots of different age classes of longleaf pines. And that's not something that is seen here in this photo. Now, if you were to go back and hug the old tree today, you would see a very different picture because the park staff have already implemented multiple prescribed fires in this area, as well as done some other mechanical removal of a lot of these other competing woody shrubs. I have another video from Brady. This one I chose because it has a great view of that ground cover diversity. So what you see before you is a fall scene in longleaf pine savanna with those flowers, the grasses, they're just blowing in the wind. And I wanted to emphasize that because you're going to hear the word longleaf a lot today. And of course, that is the tree that a lot of this work centers around. It's what we rally around, but it's not everything. And it's the ecosystem that is associated with longleaf that is really the heart of the restoration and conservation work for this species. And if you notice, we even had a pollinator come visit us, an excellent example of why this ground cover diversity is so critical, because it supports a vast array of insects and lots of other unique wildlife species. That diversity is illustrated here in North Carolina at the Green Swamp Preserve. The Green Swamp has documented 52 different native plant species in a 1 meter squared area. This picture is from the Green Swamp. If you look closely, you'll see the white PVC pipes on the ground that's creating the frame of a 1 meter square area. And each of those pin flags is marking the presence of a different species. So every time a species was encountered, the first time it was encountered, a pin flag was placed and numbered. There are not 52 pin flags in this picture. There's probably about 25. But I think it's still a great way to help illustrate the scale, that small scale of diversity within the system. Think about these flags being double within that meter square. It's, from a non-botanist eye, it can be hard to pick up on some of these individual species. And these pin flags do a great job of showing us how diverse an area like this can be. But if we look globally, we're also looking at a very diverse spot. We live in a biodiversity hotspot. So this map shows those areas across the globe. And the coastal plain here in the United States is ranked among tropical rainforests, coral reefs. The reason is because the high number of endemic species that are found nowhere else. And I highly encourage, if you missed last week's lecture by Dr. Alan Weekly, he goes through a lot of excellent examples of those endemic species and how significant they are across the landscape. If we bring it back in, so we were talking small, then we went really big, and now we're going to go somewhere in the middle and look at the southeastern United States. This is where longleaf pine would occur naturally in 9 states, from Southern Virginia down to Eastern Texas. There are a variety of longleaf habitats that occur across this area. Of course, longleaf was the dominant tree species historically, but when we look at some of the ground cover, there are patterns. So this map is depicting how you might break up those woodlands or savannas based on the dominant tree, as well as wiregrass versus blue stem systems. Of course, longleaf is not the only pine tree that is found in this area, of course. It has additional pine friends, loblolly pine, slash pine, shortleaf pine, pond pine. Where these different species occurred and who really was dominant in one particular area would have been influenced by a variety of factors. But one big one was the influence of fire. This map here shows the historical frequency at which fire would have occurred among longleaf pine habitats. What I would like you just really to focus on is that light gray area. That's the area that would have seen the most frequent fire, as frequently as annual fires in these habitats. I don't want by any means to try to say that this whole area burned every year. That's not how the fire moved around the landscape. There were many factors that would influence how frequently an area burns, the soils, the topography, the hydrology. Those all interact to affect fire behavior and plant composition. Of course, longleaf pine is uniquely situated to thrive in a frequently burned landscape. This infographic is kind of a snapshot as to how this tree accomplishes that. And it's across the life cycle. So we've mentioned the grass stage as a young plant. It is focusing its growth underground. It will then grow rapidly once it has sufficient resources, and most of the growth, so then the growth bud can move above where typical flame heights would occur. And then once you have a mature longleaf pine tree, it's the canopy is above the typical flame heights, the bark thick, it protects from any damaging fire. I think one of the coolest things about how this tree and fire interplay along with its neighbors, the other plant species, is that they're perpetuating each other. So the needle litter that falls naturally from the longleaf pine, the native grasses provide excellent fuel for future fires. And those fires then provide really great habitat for more native species. And so they work together like that. The fire helps reduce the competition and opens up the canopy to facilitate a lot of really, really cool plants. And on the far side, the right side of that graph, I have a few pictures of how this would look in action, right? So the grass stage needles might be scorched, but then they quickly regrow after following a fire. I mentioned before that we're talking about longleaf, but we're not just talking about longleaf. And I wanted to emphasize this again with the relationship with fire. Longleaf as a tree doesn't have to have fire in order to grow. It thrives in fire environments, but it doesn't have to have fire. You might have a longleaf pine in your backyard that hasn't seen fire, to demonstrate that it is capable of growing without fire. But the longleaf ecosystem requires fire. So that means all of the parts that accompanies the tree thrive in a fire-maintained system. And this is that close-up shot that we had of the green swamp earlier. This is that faraway shot, and you can see the additional pin flags marking all those unique species. The way that fire helps support the longleaf pine ecosystem and that diversity varies across the range. We mentioned 9 states. We see a lot of different types of longleaf plant communities. And again, the soils, the topography, the productivity of the site, all affect the fire behavior and the subsequent plant community. A lot of maybe the longleaf that you might be familiar with, a lot of people think of it as being only on those sandy sites. But really what we're seeing is so much of what remains of longleaf today is just a mere fraction of what we once had. So when we remember the map that we looked at that showed this range-wide distribution of longleaf pine across the Southeast, it was estimated to be about 90 million acres historically, a bit more than that. 90 million acres is a really hard number to grasp, especially when you think about it across nine different states. So I would like you to think about our historic longleaf acreage as being a chocolate pecan pie. And we're going to share this pie because it's one of my favorite types of pie. But over time, people are taking a slice of our pie. We lost longleaf through conversion to other land uses, conversion to other tree species, fire exclusion. All these things worked together to reduce longleaf to a mere slice or a crumble of what we once had. So if we think about, we once had a pie that we could all share amongst ourselves. Now we have pie crumbs that we have to share among ourselves. And I don't know about you, but I would be very unsatisfied if I had to share this little amount of pie with you all. And when we think about all of the things that longleaf pine ecosystems provide, this is how much left we had to have those same benefits. The question of why longleaf is the answer of why longleaf is important to so many. How it's one tree for many communities, it provides many benefits. So when we look, we've brushed on the ecological communities and the diversity, plants, wildlife. We even had a pollinator in there. What we haven't talked about are those cultural communities. The longleaf had a very significant role, still does have a significant role in the communities of Indigenous people. It has a very important role historically in the founding of many of our government and many infrastructure pieces. It has a lot of economic contributions to our communities, right? And many of these things are going to be discussed throughout the series, and I highly encourage you to come back and listen to some more of those experts in those subjects. One thing I wanted to emphasize today in terms of the benefit of longleaf pine for our communities is looking at those benefits it provides from an ecosystem perspective, that category under regulating. And the example I wanted to pull out here is in terms of water. So this photo is depicting a pond kind of in the background, surrounded by a vast forest canopy. And the benefits of a forested area to our drinking water, both in quality and quantity, are huge. That's any forest, really, right? All forests provide a very significant contributions to that piece of our water quality. But when we look at longleaf pine, what you might not know is that there are particular advantages of longleaf towards our water quality. And that is because of what we talked about earlier, its relationship with fire, and the management that comes with longleaf pine forests. The forest structure that we can kind of see here in this photo, we definitely saw that in the video at the beginning of this talk. All of those things provide additional benefits to our water quality and yield. Longleaf is a drought-tolerant tree compared to other pine species. It also, because of the prescribed fire and the open canopy, its use of water is reduced, so it actually can result in higher water yields. These are really significant things in our current, climate situation, and that benefits the forest landowner, but it also benefits everybody downstream. And I think that this one example right here of the importance of longleaf, all of our forest systems, is really critical when we look at the benefits to our communities. The one other thing that I wanted to emphasize is that with our changing climate, longleaf pines are naturally more resilient to some of the threats that could occur and that are occurring now. They are more resilient to insects and diseases compared to other southern yellow pine species, to some insects and diseases. They are more resilient to windstorms, as well as wildfire. You know, we talked a lot about its relationship with fire. And so even though this ecosystem likes to burn, it burns in a way that provides less risk for if there is a wildfire. And there's a really great benefit from all of these different things. The images on this slide are showing documents that have been developed specifically talking about each of these subjects. And I'm happy to share these with anyone to kind of dive into the specifics associated with in that particular relationship. The good news is that, you know, the bad news was that little tiny piece of pie that we have to share. But the good news is that we are working towards a better future. So this is now a graph showing us what our pie image showed us, where we went from 90 million acres to a historic low of 3 million acres of longleaf pine. And that it's at that kind of critical urgency in the loss of longleaf pine that the organization I work for, the Longleaf Alliance, was founded in 1995. Huge things have happened for longleaf conservation since that time. There is a regional collaboration called America's Longleaf Restoration Initiative that created a conservation plan for the entire landscape. And through the work of both that regional effort and all of the people associated with it, various stakeholders from nonprofits like the one I work with to state, federal agencies, private industries, just longleaf enthusiasts and supporters. We've done a lot of work for longleaf pine. So each year, the America's Longleaf group gets together and we document how much we've done. And we provide an annual report each year. The 2023 data is collected and is underway to releasing the next year's report. But as of 2022, we had over 19 million acres of work, accomplishments towards longleaf restoration and conservation. Of course, some of these acres, some of this work is occurring on the same acres, right? If you remember back to that map about how frequently fire occurs, some of these prescribed fire acres are happening in the same place, right? So we've been measuring this work since 2010. And a longleaf area might have burned 3, 4, maybe even 5 times since then through prescribed fire management. So some of this accomplishment is repeated maintenance work because it does take a consistent dedication to getting fire on the ground to maintain these systems in the healthiest way that supports a variety of plants and animals. So the good news is that with this work, we're now at about an estimated 5.2 million of longleaf pine acres across the Southeast. So that is a really significant effort underway, the work of a lot of people. But we're not there yet. And the ultimate goal for America's longleaf restoration is to get towards 8 million acres. So we have a ways to go. But a lot of people remain dedicated to making this work happen. This past year, there's even been an updated conservation plan to help guide that work into the future. And I wanted to just illustrate how some of this range-wide work happens at a more local level, because that's where the heart of all of those accomplishment acres really happens, at those local communities, right? Those local groups. So America's Longleaf, part of their strategy was to identify local groups known as local implementation teams to really spearhead the work for longleaf restoration and conservation in some of those critical areas of longleaf, areas where longleaf remained, that there's a lot of potential to do a lot of good. And that's what this map is depicting here. Each one of those little trees represents a different team that's in place to help spur this forward. You'll see there occur in all 9 states where longleaf pine occurs. And since we have so many North Carolinians here joining us, at least in the room today, I wanted to highlight that we have 3 of those here in North Carolina. The Sandhills has a partnership that's working to kind of, collaborate and move this work forward, as well as an area towards Wilmington, known as the Cape Fear Conservation Collaboration, and then also on the coast in the Onslow Bight area. Not to say that there's not longleaf restoration happening in other parts where there's not a team. That's not what this is saying at all. But these are kind of core areas where a lot of the work is happening. And the landowners, the partner organizations, the land managers are working together to help kind of move these things forward. This might look like, collaborating on a grant application where, money is available for multiple entities to support some of the management on the ground, that sort of thing. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that North Carolina is a little unique in that we also have a state group that helps to promote, things that are happening, and that's known as the North Carolina Longleaf Coalition. And I did bring a few little things over there, stickers and magnets that come from our coalition group. And again, it's just another way of helping kind of coordinate those things where we need to at the state level. Lastly, I wanted to remind folks either in the audience that we have a resource online as well as in person. I have a few copies with me from one of the tools that the Longleaf Alliances use to promote the longleaf pine restoration and conservation across the range, and that's through our magazine, The Longleaf Leader. And so anyone here in the audience, I would encourage you to grab a copy. And if not, we also have past issues available online. With that, I'm open to any questions. Yes.
So with such a large acreage being restored to Longleaf, is it mostly private land or mostly public?
That's a great question. So you asked if the majority of restoration and conservation is happening on private lands or public lands.
And also will happen.
And into the future. That is a great question. So the majority of land here in the Southeast is in private ownership. So that is where most potential for longleaf restoration occurs. In terms of where things are going right now, a lot of the annual accomplishments that get done from year to year, some of it is occurring on private lands and some more on public lands. The thing that is mostly occurring on private lands is establishment of new longleaf pine stands. That's the planting. That's that one photo that I showed you with those young longleaf pines where they're reestablishing longleaf, or these areas might have been historically longleaf, but then we're in agriculture. Or sometimes we're looking at restoring longleaf in an area that had become a loblolly forest, right? And so they're taking it back to longleaf. So a lot of that potential is happening on private land. Of course, there are many private landowners who also own more mature stands and are actively managing those as well. But the majority of planting is occurring on private land.
So what's the incentive to get private landowners to convert land back to longleaf?
Yeah. So you asked about the incentives for landowners. And if we go back to the benefits of longleaf, that's the ultimate incentive, is the landowner's objectives for their property somehow fall within those benefits. And so we want only landowners who those benefits speak to them, because that means that they're a good fit to be a steward of longleaf pine. So they could be doing it for multiple reasons, and usually they are when they're choosing longleaf. And how those different benefits weigh in their decision varies from landowner to landowner, where they're looking at economics or aesthetics even, or they're just called to put longleaf back to where it used to be, right? Because that's the thing too, is just putting it back to the way it was. There are programs that help landowners do that. There are a number of financial assistance programs that provide additional funds for landowners who are looking to restore longleaf through planting, through prescribed fire, through ground cover reestablishment. And those are occurring at the federal level through programs like through the Natural Resources Conservation Service and RCS, but also the state level through local forestry programs, and then even nonprofits like the Longleaf Alliance have additional funds to help support purchasing of trees for longleaf. So there's a variety of partners who can offer that kind of financial offset to establishing and then also managing their longleaf into the future, not just the initial cost, but also, continuing to fund prescribed burning, for example.
What's the, I guess, I know that there's a number of military bases that have longleaf restoration efforts underway. I used to ride my biking on what was Fort Benning, Georgia a lot, and I was amazed at the thousands and thousands of acres of longleaf. restore their organism and Cherry Point Air Station. Why? What's in it for the military bases? Like, why is it that for whatever reason, some of these, it's great, these installations that have hundreds of thousands of acres, why have they decided that the best use of their land is longleaf restoration?
So he asked specifically about Department of Defense property in the public arena. And what I forgot to mention earlier when you asked the question about public versus private land and who's doing this work, there's a huge amount of public land work that is happening. And when we look at that, now we're looking at conservation of it, protection and perpetuity and through, public land holdings. Also, prescribed fire is a big part of that. The Department of Defense got involved really in the longleaf business because they were the anchor points in terms of remaining longleaf pine ecosystems. And along with that, really critically important plant and animal species. The red-cockaded woodpecker, of course, is maybe, you're most familiar with and spearheaded a lot of this work for longleaf restoration and conservation. The Department of Defense property was where fire was still occurring during a period of mass fire exclusion across the Southeast. Of course, they're continuing to use their bases for training, and there were a lot of fires that were ignited through that process. And so those areas burned, and they continued to use prescribed fire as a defense against wildfire. And so those areas were maintained with fire. They had and continue to have really great quality longleaf pine habitats. And so many of our species that are critically imperiled have a foothold there. And they're required to do their duty for those species, including the red-cockaded woodpecker. But by doing so, by helping promote this in a sustainable way, they're able to continue their main mission, which is to train and be military ready. And so they're able to continue to do that while promoting good habitat for species like the red-cockaded woodpecker to help prevent any sort of stop to that work.
Any questions?
Yeah, we have a few coming in on Zoom. The first one, where is a really nice location to see longleaf pines near Chapel Hill?
A nice location to see longleaf pines at Chapel Hill. Well, we're at the North Carolina Botanical Garden, and there are longleaf pines here. But if I were to say probably my favorite place to visit, an easy access spot for substantial longleaf pine, I would visit Weymouth Woods Nature Preserve in Southern Pines. Not just for the big tree or the old tree, which is really fun, but their main location where the visitor center has a long history of prescribed fire and is a wonderful place to visit.
I'll add to that, we have an upcoming partnership walk there with the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. So watch for that on our registration page. Any questions?
Do one.
Just to point out, the Department of Defense with probably some exclusions subject to the environmental species, to the Endangered Species Act. So they have been dealing with RCW going back a long time.
Yes, absolutely. So I didn't want to give the false impression that Department of Defense was like, yes, bring on all the red-cockaded woodpeckers here. There's a long history of that dynamic with the Endangered Species Act and working towards finding a solution that's viable for everyone. But that is, the Endangered Species Act is a critical point of restoring longleaf pine systems for the red-cockaded woodpecker.
Another from Zoom. Are there economic benefits for private landowners, like carbon credits? And if so, what are some successful examples of how this is working?
Yeah, so there is a lot of momentum moving forward in terms of carbon credit availability to private landowners. I don't have a specific example that I can share, but I work with somebody with the Longleaf Alliance who certainly could, and I'd be happy to connect with you there. There are several companies that are available to help provide that, and they're trying different techniques and strategies. So it's a developing opportunity, and I think an answer now would change very quickly. But in addition to carbon credits, there's also developing opportunities in terms of other ecosystem services with water quality, in addition to looking at the biodiversity piece.
In developing your understory and specifically the herbaceous layer, what's your percent of using just the seed bank as opposed to chemical burn down, fire, and then planting no-till?
Yeah, so you asked specifically about restoring the ground cover, and so much of that answer depends on your starting spot. So if we were to take an area that had been used in agriculture for a long period of time, your starting point is probably 0. And so that's when you would have to do a lot of inputs in terms of either seed or using plugs to start your work. In an area that might have been forested but fire excluded for a long period of time, there is a higher probability that there are remnant native species that are been hanging out ready for the opportunity to shine once that overstory that's been suppressing them is removed, and once fire is reintroduced. That can be coming back from the seed bank, but also sometimes it's old rootstock from plants. So there's some really interesting research that looks at an old growth tree, that there's also old growth ground cover, and that a lot of these native species that occur are actually some pretty old plants themselves. And so sometimes landowners can be very successful in a forested area where they remove the offsite pine, whether it's loblolly or slash, and implement a fire regime, and they'll see some really positive native understory response. So that's really a starting point. And then they could do additional inputs from there, depending on what they see. It's definitely a long-term process for ground cover, and is patience is required, because when you establish some native species, sometimes you see some things you don't like, and you have to maintain any weedy competitors, whether they're native competitors or invasives, as you give the native species a chance to take off. Yes.
Sorry, changing microphones here for our Zoom audience. Are there any deciduous trees or shrub species that grow in association with longleaf pine, or does the fire regime suppress them?
There is a vast number of other woody trees and shrubs that co-occur in longleaf and definitely should be there present. What happens with fire exclusion is that they tend to take over. And in many cases, when they become large enough, they're suppressing the native ground cover, they're suppressing young longleaf. And so they're removing some of those fuels that you need for frequent fire. So they're preventing fire from easily moving through the system. Sometimes their own leaves are really bad fuel, and so their leaf drop is also preventing subsequent fires. So they can be problematic in that way, but they are definitely part of the system, and we're not advocating for complete removal. It's just they need to be put in check a bit. And so an example of that would be a numerous native oak species, like kind of some of these shorter oaks or shrubbier oaks are very much a part of the system. But with removal of fire, they overtake and have suppressed the ground cover and to a big detriment to the health of the forest. So an ideal situation would be frequent fire that kind of knocks them back periodically. And the other part is that it's, when fire is moving through an area, it's not going to burn everything completely and to the same degree. And so there's also opportunity for little pockets, right, where your oaks might become larger and are able to bear more acorns, for example, which is definitely something we want to have there. It's just when things get out of control, and a lot of landowners battle an oak like that, or sweet gum, for example, is another big one in terms of a problematic native woody species.
Yeah, sort of answered my question about sort of natural succession. Just take a agricultural field that's abandoned. We have so much of it around the state, tobacco fields or whatever. And normally what you'd see is pines, gums, or loblolly pines usually, but gums and the like coming in. And how can, unless you plug it or bring it in, how can you get a longleaf pine started?
So in those agriculture situations, you don't have the starting points to get the plants in there. And so restoration in agriculture is much more intensive and takes a lot more time and input. In an area that has existing longleaf pine, there are a lot of really interesting techniques to promote natural regeneration of longleaf. The problem with natural regeneration is that, one, we have less longleaf around. So the opportunities for natural regeneration are just substantially less than before, than historically, right, when it was the dominant tree. The other tricky part with natural regeneration of longleaf is that the longleaf pine seed production is really variable. So though you might see cones, on the longleafs that you see around, in terms of a good cone crop that provides the most opportunity for a good regeneration yield of in a certain year, longleaf is known to produce a good crop every 7-ish years, and that's really variable geographically. So for example, last year, I was visiting in Alabama, and there was natural regeneration everywhere. It was just like, it was a carpet, literally, of little longleaf pine seedlings. Whereas an area here, there's Bladen Lake State Forest in North Carolina is the site where one of the cone crop estimates are annually, and they were, poor or failed crop year, right? They didn't have that. And so depending on where you are, it could affect your ability to do that. For longleaf to naturally regenerate, though, they also will do so best in an area that already has a prescribed fire regime in it. And that's because the fire provides great microsites for those seedlings to establish. And then if you're already burning an area, those longleafs establish themselves until they get to that growth stage. They're resilient to fire again. And the fire can knock back those other woody things you talked about invading agriculture areas, as they do in natural forested areas as well. They can knock back loblolly pine, sweet gums, and so fire is a really important part of naturally regenerating a longleaf stand. Yes.
So,
are the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission open to restoring some areas that might be in loblolly now, restoring some of those areas to longleaf? There's an awful lot of land along the Roanoke River that's owned by those two agencies. And I just wonder if some of it could go back to Longleaf.
So I don't know what the particular plans are for the property around Roanoke River, but there are definitely a lot of longleaf restoration efforts happening by both organizations. Wildlife Resource Commission owns a lot of longleaf property in multiple parts of the state, and in addition to a very active prescribed fire management program, they are actively restoring longleaf on a lot of properties as well. So some areas are really young longleaf at this point because they started with 0 longleaf and they've been putting it back, and also converting lawball areas back to longleaf. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it's my understanding that the property that U.S. Fish and Wildlife owns in North Carolina, the habitat suitability for longleaf is small compared to some of the other agencies, public agencies in our state. But the other thing that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife does is they also provide assistance to private landowners. So they are doing, they have a program called the Partners for Fish and Wildlife program that supports longleaf restoration on private lands as well.
Any other questions in the room?
Yes.
Hold on one second.
I can talk.
This is for the Zoom audience.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Well, what is the lily species and what is it growing in?
Oh, so you're asking about the picture on here. Oh, this lily right here. This is a paper sculpture by Cynthia Woodsong. And I believe this is the Carolina lily or the sandhill lily, So this is a lily species that does occur in longleaf pine habitats. And she does these wonderful replicas of native species using paper. And so she is hosting some programs. I know one is already full. Hopefully there's some spots, additional ones. So this is an excellent example. There are also some really great carnivorous plants that she also provides that are a really fun outreach tool for something like the Venus flytrap, for example, where it's a really special endemic to North and South Carolina, but hard for most people to see. And so I love having those kinds of things that are so botanically accurate, right? Because there's a lot of, particularly for a Venus flytrap, there's a lot of embellishments that might occur in some of the way that it's depicted. Yes, so there's actually earlier this year we did an article in the Longleaf Leader about Cynthia's artwork, and I love the story because she shared an experience where she was out with a natural resource professional who came home with one of her sculptures and walked up to his family, and they were like, "Why did you pick that?" And he's like, "Oh, no. This is from Cynthia." So definitely a very realistic and a great outreach tool. Yeah.
Okay. Sarah, thank you so much. This was really wonderful information. Thank you so much for building on what has already been presented and bringing in new information to us. So join me in giving Sarah a hand. And we have more in the series to come. So David will send out the link in the follow-up email after this program. So join us for a number of the upcoming talks and workshops and walks and hikes. And we look forward to seeing you there. I will add, if you are enjoying this and you're not yet a member of the North Carolina Botanical Garden or the Longleaf Alliance, please consider joining. Membership fees and dues really help us to do the good work that we're all doing in Longleaf and for the garden, many other conservation practices. So please consider joining as a member. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for the Zoom audience, and we'll see you soon.